In the small town of Glenhaven in northern Austria, a man named Rupert, the town's longtime butcher, died. His body was stuffed into the water tub of the washing machine. Only I knew the culprit wasn't a person. It was the washing machine itself. That was in 1990. Before the horrifying incident, snow had fallen continuously for a full day and night, covering the rooftops, wooden fences, and the winding cobblestone streets in white. That night, I was home alone, wrapped tightly in a blanket, lying on the wooden bed near the window, my eyes glued to the old TV playing a classic Austrian drama. A famous scene. Princess Teresa was about to meet Archduke Ferdinand. Suddenly, the screen began to flicker lightly. Black and white static waves rippled across. Then a white flash blinked once and everything went dark. The TV screen shut off without a sound. Startled, I quickly crawled out from under the blanket to check. Just as I stepped off the bed, the screen lit up again, but it wasn't the show anymore. On the screen, against a pitch-black background, a grayish text appeared, faint and trembling, as if written with a finger on fogged glass. "Be careful. Electrical device." I stood frozen. Before I could panic, the image flickered several times, then returned to normal. The scene resumed. Teresa was crying in the Archduke's arms, but no emotion remained in me. Only a chilling cold lingered. Not from the snow, but deep inside my chest. I thought, maybe I had seen things. Maybe I was tired, or it was the old TV playing tricks on me. The next morning, my father, a rescue worker, burst into the house, pulling the blanket off me. Seeing I was unharmed, he sighed with relief, then quickly covered me again and said, "Stay inside. Don't go out." "Something's happened." I yawned, rubbed my eyes. "What's going on?" He said, "Rupert, the butcher, is dead. His body was found inside the washing machine. The police are investigating. Don't go outside. Ignore anyone who knocks. Got it?" After saying that, he put on his thick cap and fur coat, then rushed out into the snow, which was already half a foot deep. I nodded, but didn't keep my promise. Less than 10 minutes after he left, I jumped out of bed, got dressed, and ran to my best friend Lars's house just a few blocks away. I invited him to come with me to Rupert's place to see what was going on. In a small town like Glenhaven, anything unusual was a big event. Everyone knew Rupert wasn't a good man. Whenever he drank, he caused trouble, yelled, even beat his wife. He had been warned before, but never changed. When we arrived, the police had already set up barriers around the house. Several men in dark green uniforms and fur hats stood guard. Snow was still falling gently. Rupert's wife was sobbing by the door, her hair dusted white with snow, eyes swollen. The townsfolk gathered in a thick crowd. 3 rows of people pressed together. Lars and I couldn't get through, so we stayed outside listening. An old man whispered to his neighbor, "Unbelievable. Last night the snow fell so thick, and yet..." I heard him hesitate, then stop. I didn't need to hear more, because I knew Rupert's death was not caused by a person. It started from my TV. From the strange words that appeared last night. A January wind blew through the square, scattering old papers and the faint smell of melting snow. The crowd parted like water, making way for a group of men in gray moo uniforms and large fur hats, holding ropes and shouting harsh commands. A silver-gray pickup truck rolled slowly over the dirty snow, its bed covered with a tarp, but blood had soaked through, staining the fabric dark red. When the tarp was pulled back, the crowd fell silent. A red and white washing machine. It should have been an inanimate object, but at that moment, I swear, it was smiling. Not with lips or teeth, but with the curved shape of its lid and the gap in its body, like a mouth stretched into a mad, mysterious grin. Lars and I stood frozen until a sharp call pierced the wind. "Charles, come home to your father." I turned around. Dad was running like crazy toward me, his heels digging deep into the thick snow. His face was flushed with anger, eyes wide open. "Don't you understand what I told you? I said you are not to go out." I I was about to argue, but before I could say anything, he swung his hand a slap like thunder. I didn't cry, just stepped back, eyes fixed on his furious gaze. "Do you want to die like old Rupert? Do you know what happened?" I stammered a few words. "I was just watching the excitement." Dad yanked my hand hard, pulling me toward the narrow path. The cold wind whipped my face, but inside me it was even colder. "Listen, Charles. Some things shouldn't be seen. Some things aren't meant for humans. Old Rupert's death is a warning." I said nothing. My mind was still haunted by the strange feeling I got looking at that washing machine. Back home, Dad collapsed into a chair by the fireplace. He lit a cigarette, his hands trembling. "Our TV won't turn on anymore today," he said, his voice absent. I was startled, but I watched it just yesterday. "It's unplugged," Dad snapped. I turned to see the TV's power cord dangling, completely pulled out of the socket. Then, what was I watching last night? Dad's favorite show was over. He stood up, looked out the window where the snow had stopped falling. His voice dropped. "Why isn't your mother home yet?" I hesitated. "I don't know. Maybe? You want me to go to Aunt Elspeth's and check?" Dad nodded, put on his coat. I layered on my winter jacket, and together we left the small stone-paved house, crossing the misty forest to Aunt Elspeth's, an old wooden house at the top of the hill. Aunt Elspeth ran a small grocery store, the main room filled with candles, sweets, and strong liquor. The back was converted into a game and entertainment room. When we arrived, a tapping sound came from the window. One green piece, one red piece, a sequence of one, a pair of threes. The wooden door creaked open. Aunt Elspeth, small and wary, with cloudy eyes behind thick glasses, invited us in. I recognized that laughter even before seeing her. A hoarse, brittle laugh echoing through the damp wooden walls thick with tar smell. In this snowy dark town, no one had that laugh but my mother. I stepped briskly across the cold stone yard, my footsteps ringing on the old snow like a knife scraping stone. Pushing open the heavy oak door, I stepped inside. At first, nothing seemed special, just the back room of Aunt Elspeth's grocery store. Once a coal cellar, now a gathering place for the old folks around here. On the old wooden table in the middle of the room, an ancient domino set had been replaced by an old Tibetan-style card deck, glowing with a blood-red light as the flickering oil lamp shone down. I was stunned. My mother and three others were playing cards, but their hands, those pale, bony fingers, were stained with a strange, black-red color. Blood oozing from the knuckles, dripping onto the cards below. Yet no one seemed to care. They kept laughing, staring at the game as if their souls were trapped inside those blood-soaked cards. I screamed and rushed forward, grabbing my mother's arm. Mom, stop!" She didn't look at me. Her other hand gently pushed me away, eyes never leaving the cards. She muttered, lips pressed tight as if chanting a spell. "Move aside. You'll ruin my luck." I stepped back, stunned. Dad had just run in after me. He stood frozen for a few seconds, then shouted, rushing to pull her up. Judith, what are you doing? Snap out of it. It's me, your husband. Our son is here. Judith." But my mother remained motionless, her face twisted into a distorted expression of joy, as if she were seeing something far more wonderful than any reality. I stood there, my heart pounding wildly, and then I saw it. The electrical cord leading from the card table back toward a corner of the room. I rushed toward the cord, intending to unplug it, but just then, a sudden, overwhelming sense of dread hit me. Like a cold hand gripping my chest tightly, I instinctively stepped back and an object whizzed past my face. A red card, flying like a dagger, slammed into the red brick wall behind me, leaving a deep dent. I froze, my whole body trembling. My father was still trying to pull my mother out of the chair, but her body was stiff as stone. She was still smiling, still playing the cards. one by one, as if nothing else existed beyond that cursed game. "Go, son," my father shouted. "Cut the power. Hurry." I nodded, turned and ran, not toward the card table but forward through the store. I remembered the main circuit breaker was in the storage room where Aunt Elspeth kept her supplies. I opened the door. Cold air rushed in. The hooks clattered loudly. I felt along the wall until I found the breaker. I grabbed the handle and pulled hard. The house plunged into darkness. I stood still, gasping for breath. Then from the back room I heard screams of pain, as if someone was being torn from a long, tormenting nightmare. When I ran back, my father was supporting my mother, and Aunt Marguerite was collapsed by the door. All three women were panicked, drenched in sweat, their faces pale as if they had crawled out from hell itself. We took them to the small clinic at the edge of town. On the way, my mother gripped my hand, her voice hoarse. Aunt Marguerite whispered, almost choking. "I don't remember anything. Just pulling a card, then nothing else." The doctor said they showed signs of severe dehydration and temporary neurological disorder caused by stress. But I knew it was more than just stress. We returned home as the sun disappeared behind the grim gray hills, leaving an atmosphere thick with ash and biting cold. My mother, Aunt Marguerite, and Mrs. Elena were all exhausted. The wounds on their fingertips were hastily bandaged. The dried blood stained a dull brown. What chilled me the most was that throughout the cursed game, none of them had felt pain, as if their nerves had been severed from reality. Only after the power was cut did exhaustion, hunger, and pain begin to surface. My father Laurent had just returned but immediately rushed back out again. He said he was going to find Father Emmanuel, an old monk living in isolation at the ancient Saint Valérien monastery on the edge of the Fontaine Black Forest. We waited in the main room, candlelight flickering over my mother's face, who still trembled as if her soul had just left her body. Finally they arrived. Father Emmanuel, a gaunt figure in a worn dark gray robe, entered with deep, piercing eyes. The moment he stepped across the threshold, he paused, frowned, and took a deep breath, as if the air in the house was thick with the foul stench of hell. He shook his head slightly. "It is evil," he said softly, his voice deep and rough from years spent within cold stone walls. "It is what killed Mr. Rupert, then spread to old Mr. Pascal's family, and now to you." My parents shuddered simultaneously. The name Rupert, the neighbor who had died in madness, was mentioned again, like the cruel beginning of a strange chain of events. My father sank to his knees, bowing his head like a guilty man. Without another word, Father Emmanuel quietly moved into the living room, where the card machine sat there, lifeless but ominous. He drew strange white symbols with chalk on the cold tiled floor, his hands moving continuously in the air while mumbling ancient prayers of the Augustinian order. The atmosphere remained heavy, but then Father Emmanuel stopped, eyes half closed, sniffed softly. He nodded. "For now, the evil has been driven away, but this is only the tip of the iceberg. I will return tomorrow to root it out completely. Meanwhile, take this." He handed my father a dark red envelope edged in gold without a seal. Inside was a handwritten note with instructions and a small obsidian stone. Then he silently left the house, like a shadow fading into the cold spring mist. The air in the house felt somewhat lighter. My parents exhaled as if escaping death itself. After a quick dinner, I asked permission to visit Lars, the only close friend I could still trust amid this storm of madness. He was lying on his bed, head bent over a rough notebook. When I entered, Lars lazily looked up and said, "What's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." I sat down on the edge of the bed and sighed. Rupert's situation. It didn't stop with him. Now my mother's been dragged into it too, and I told him everything. From the blood-stained playing cards to the power outage and the screams in the dark. Lars frowned slightly, then reached for a blank sheet of paper. "Let's say there's something, call it X, that possessed the card shuffler, affecting anyone who used it." I looked at him with hope. "And then?" "Well, we don't know anything about it. Lars sighed, running his hands through his hair. There's too little information to analyze. Everything is just speculation. Disappointed, I stood up, ready to leave, but Lars stopped me. Hey, wait, turn on the TV. Maybe there's something in the news. He switched on the old television. Static noises filled the room, then an old period drama appeared. Lamar Interdit, The Harem of Souls. But I remembered this film only aired at night. Lars frowned and turned to me. No way. The station changed the schedule this afternoon. They're airing the Harem movie now, and the Three Kingdoms will be on tonight. A cold shiver ran down my spine. Something was wrong. Very wrong. I stared at the screen. The face of a woman dressed in black silk, silently smiling. Her eyes were looking straight at me. Not at the camera. Not at any other character, but directly at me. I couldn't stop thinking about the mysterious red words that once appeared on the unplugged TV screen. They lingered in my mind all night, the fear rising like a cold mist covering a mountain town in winter. Lars and I continued our discussion in his dimly lit room. We decided to name the three strange incidents: the time glitch, the bloodied washing machine, and the death-face card shuffler. The names sounded childish, but we couldn't find anything better to describe those unexplainable events. Their common and terrifying trait was that all three had once been tools serving humans. But after being infected by some evil force, they seemed to gain consciousness. On an old scrap of paper, Lars carefully noted, "The TV and freezer show signs of autonomy. Some devices want to kill people. Others seem to be trying to warn." I swallowed hard. "So, from this, what can we conclude?" Lars frowned, rested his pen across his lips, and pretended to blow imaginary cigarette smoke. "We're about to face a real danger. More people will die." And he was right. The next morning, news spread across the region. Vaughn, the wandering pilgrim known for exorcisms, was found dead at the foot of the eastern hill. His death sparked controversy. Some said he was drained of his soul by demons. Others claimed it was a murder by an ancient cult. But only Lars and I knew his death was linked to household appliances. My parents, practical but somewhat superstitious, made a decisive move. They cleared all appliances from the house. Everything, from the oven to the ceiling fan, the coffee maker to the hairdryer, was packed and sent to Lars's place. It was a crazy action, but who could blame them in this situation? Lars moved in with me, where only a wood stove and oil lamps remained. That night, we slept in the biting cold of northern France, the fire crackling in the stove like the last heartbeat before fading away. The next morning, I was woken by my father's hoarse shout from downstairs. "Get out here, hurry, everyone come!" Startled, I jumped out of bed. When I arrived, my parents and Lars were standing by the large window, looking out at the snow-covered garden. It had been snowing for 3 days straight, but somehow the yard was spotless, as if someone had swept it clean. Outside, beneath the gray sky and gentle snow, a gigantic snowman stood tall in the yard. The snow piles weren't cleared. No, someone or something had sculpted that figure overnight. The snowman's face was carved with grotesque precision. It grinned, a terrifying smile, twisted as if mocking life itself. Surrounding it were dozens of small household devices: vacuum cleaners, mixers, fans, drills, even an old microwave. They lay scattered around it, as if bowing in submission. A chill ran deep into my bones. The morning air was eerily still, as if the entire universe was holding its breath. The worst part was, the snowman's smile was exactly the same as the face that appeared on the TV screen that night. After breakfast, we headed to the Thorn Town Hall. My father had been an old friend of the mayor, so getting into his office wasn't difficult. The mayor, a middle-aged, overweight man with a ruddy face, was bent over his desk. He looked up with sleepy eyes. "What's going on? Why are you bringing the whole family here?" My father hadn't even had a chance to respond when I stepped forward, placing a piece of paper on the table. one that detailed the strange events, along with a crude sketch of the snowman from that morning. My voice was no longer trembling. It had deepened, cold as the frost outside. You need to see this, and you need to listen to what we have to say, because if you don't, you'll be next. The town mayor, a middle-aged man with a perpetual look of fatigue, crossed his arms and listened. We recounted everything, from the TV showing red letters while unplugged to the murderous washing machine and even the strange snowman crafted overnight, surrounded by household appliances. When I finished, the room fell utterly silent. At first he only chuckled lightly, as if he thought we were joking, but my father's resolute gaze changed his attitude. "Wait a moment," he said, reaching for the red rotary phone beside him. He dialed a number. The line crackled clearly, a faint hiss, then a man's voice answering. We stood silently as he questioned, but instead of a clear reply, the voice on the other end repeated the same message over and over. "Believe in science. Don't let rumors disrupt everything." The mayor frowned, hung up, and tried calling several other numbers, but all the lines, fire department, police, medical services, answered with the same phrase. Different voices, different tones, but the same sentence. Believe in science. Just then, the printer on his desk lit up, clicking and clacking as it started printing pages, though no one touched it. 1 page, then 2, 3, until 16 pages, all filled with text. The room was filled with a steady hissing noise, like a cold wind blowing in from another world. The mayor looked at each page with panic and confusion, then suddenly shouted, "Cam, the printer is broken. Take it to be fixed immediately." A young man in the room hurriedly took the printer away, while the mayor gestured for us to follow him out. I spoke up. "Excuse me, may I see those pages?" Stunned beyond belief, the mayor handed me the stack of printed sheets. I studied each page carefully and then began folding them together. The first and second sheets combined to form the word Morgen, meaning dream in Old German. The third and fourth joined into meaning respect or honor. The 16 A4 pages formed 4 large, clear words, like a warning. Believe in science. Seeing this, the mayor frantically grabbed his phone and made repeated calls, but every time he received different voices, sometimes gentle, sometimes dry, always insisting that rumors about household appliances were nonsense and urging him to believe in science. He even misdialed when trying to reach the fire department. Yet the voice on the other end still insisted they were the real firefighters. We quickly realized the serious problem. The phones themselves, also household devices, were mimicking human voices, responding to the mayor with vague, eerie phrases like a supernatural entity, just like the old radio Ulrich once used to send signals. The one that had sent chills through the entire town. At that moment, the mayor fully trusted us. The 5 of us, my parents, Lars, the town mayor, and I, retreated to the mayor's small office to try to make sense of these bizarre events. We tried to summarize the mysterious rules behind these strange occurrences. The only conclusion we could reach was every household device in this old house had been infected by a supernatural energy, turning them into communication tools of an unfathomable force. These devices had to be thrown out, kept away from all contact with us. We locked the office door tightly. That night, the 5 of us, my parents, Lars, the town mayor, and I, huddled in the old wooden room. We gathered around the old wooden table in the mayor's office, holding the clean sheets of paper and black ink pens, beginning to carefully write down the strict rules Lars, the intellectual of the group, cautiously proposed. He explained that once the household devices in this old house were activated, we had to pay attention to the smallest details to avoid falling into an invisible trap. The first rule, Lars began in a deep voice, is always to check whether the device is properly connected to a power source. If you find a household appliance working without electricity, stay far away immediately. He looked at each of us, as if wanting to engrave that rule deeply into our minds. Rule number 2, he continued. When using household appliances, especially under unusual circumstances, pay attention to the duration of use. If you notice someone using a device strangely, immediately cut off the power to that area. where the device cannot observe us. Beneath the small print, Lars added a note with a solemn handwriting. These devices can communicate information through sound and text, not only through humans. Therefore, communication with them must be cautious and careful in verifying the source of information. Meanwhile, in the corner of the paper, another small note was written explaining the events that had occurred. The sudden printer malfunction, the fake phone calls, the radio spreading rumors, all fall within these rules. Rule number 4, Lars said with a sharp gaze. If no household appliances remain in the house, these devices may actively seek out their owners. He marked this line in red ink, like a warning that could not be ignored. And finally he said, Rule number 5, most household appliances are unconscious and neutral. Only a small portion of them can lose control and become aggressive. These conscious devices are very rare, and they seldom tend to protect humans. He lightly tapped the pen on the paper, the final line also marked seriously in red. The mayor looked at us, eyes full of concern. Is there anything to add? Are we missing anything? We fell silent. For the moment, no one had any additional ideas. Immediately, the mayor ordered all town officials to gather. Copies of the rules were mass printed and posted everywhere, on streets, doorways, and street lamps, to warn the townspeople to be alert to any appliances showing strange signs. We suddenly realized the situation had worsened drastically. Almost every family in town had encountered incidents with household appliances. Some tragedies were both heartbreaking and unbelievable. Mr. Jacob, the longtime fishmonger, was locked inside a freezer until he froze to death. Mrs. Greta, an elderly widow, suffered severe burns from the electric blanket she used to keep warm during winter. Worse still, Mr. Gustav, the director of the local power plant, died from an electric shock while checking a light switch in the control room. I turned to Lars and asked, Are all these incidents with household appliances random acts, or are they following a common purpose? Lars looked deep into my eyes, his voice slow and ominous, like a prophecy. Probably the latter. Look at the phone and printer in the mayor's office. They clearly aren't alone, but are cooperating with each other. Silence engulfed the room. Outside the window, cold wind blew through bare branches, producing mournful howls like the cries of a cursed land. Lars stroked his clean-shaven chin, where a few sparse hairs had just started to grow. His eyes were thoughtful in the quiet darkness of the mayor's office. He turned to me, speaking in a low but determined voice. To find the core of these events, first we must identify the common point of these household appliances. He emphasized. First, they all require a power source. It sounded like a trivial, meaningless statement, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized it wasn't so simple at all. We need to cut off all electricity, Lars proposed. We must disconnect the power from outside the building. I asked immediately, my voice full of doubt. Cut the power, but no household appliance here is working. Lars smiled faintly, then pulled me out of the room. Afraid of what? Follow me. We stepped into the cold hallway, followed by Armand, the mayor's assistant, a notorious man in the village with a dark past and a reputation for causing trouble. Everyone hated him, but none could deny that Armand had tricks and experience dealing with the most dangerous situations. But why did a kind man like Mr. Gustav, the local power plant director, suffer such a tragic fate? That question still haunted us. We approached the old power plant located on the west side of town, and the atmosphere suddenly grew heavier. On the steel door, the lock was firmly secured, but a faint red light seeped out, flickering as if winking. A mysterious invitation. I stepped forward, gently tapping the door with an iron rod, while Leo followed closely, trembling. The steel door was closed tightly and silent, with only a few cracks letting the cold wind slip through. I was about to walk around to see if any window was still open when suddenly, upon turning back, the power plant door was wide open. We stood still, confused and stunned by this strange sight. "It feels like someone is guiding us," I said. Lars nodded in agreement. "Yes, my instinct tells me that person means no harm." Despite our hesitation, we chose to step inside. Our footsteps softly echoed through the damp corridor, faint light from dim bulbs casting shadows on moss-covered walls, evoking a mood both gloomy and cold, like the very soul of the town. We had learned to move like ghosts, hugging the walls, avoiding any loud noise. "Where do we go now?" Lars whispered. "I'm not sure. Maybe the records room, where important documents are kept," I replied, my eyes following a small sign on the wall. Lars pointed toward a direction where a green arrow flickered continuously, as if leading the way. After passing 3 corridors and 2 spiraling rusted staircases, we reached the basement. There, a rusty metal sign read, "Records Archive, Old Power Supply Area." The door creaked softly with a ting, and then slowly opened by itself. Nobody was inside. The lights turned on automatically, bathing the room in a cold, clinical bluish-white light, like that of an operating room, cold, artificial, and emotionless. Lars and I exchanged glances before stepping inside. Rows of old filing cabinets lined the walls, piled high with yellowed bundles of paper tied with fabric strings. A thin layer of dust covered everything like a winter frost. We began opening each drawer. Files spilled out, papers fluttering across the cold floor like dry corpses. We counted exactly 78 boxes of old files. Inside were only personnel documents and meticulous work schedules. Most records praised dedication and excellent performance. However, there was no sign of anything unusual, no clue hinting at the mysteries surrounding this place. I stood up, my voice heavy as I asked, "So, which file should I look at next?" Armand, our silent companion since the start, suddenly crouched on the cold stone floor, head bowed, muttering, "How should I know?" I shrugged, slightly annoyed. "Whatever you're doing, you can't just sit there quietly." Lars stamped his foot lightly, then spoke loudly. "You brought us here, surely you want to show us something, right?" No answer came. The room sank into heavy silence. I spoke again more urgently. "If the answer is yes, make the ceiling light flicker." Immediately, the dim light above flickered several times, casting moments of flashing light like lightning in the dark. "We're talking to the light," I whispered, feeling strange but unable to deny it. The light continued to flicker, a silent response from the darkness. This strange dialogue lasted for a few minutes, until I decided to follow the light's suggestion. A completely new file box was pulled out from a secret shelf, so clean it seemed unnatural. On it was the name Ludwig Grimm, with personal details clearly written. Age 20, employee ID 4396. The name Ludwig Grimm startled me, a familiar feeling spreading through my mind. I opened the file and found only a thin sheet of paper recording date hired April 1987, date resigned December 1989, reason automatically missing, a cold and emotionless note. Suddenly, recalling something, I slapped my thigh, making Lars startle and turn toward me. "Isn't Ludwig Grimm him?" I exclaimed. Lars bowed his head, voice low and sorrowful. "Ludwig is my older brother, but he has an intellectual disability, with the mind of a 3 or 4-year-old child. The family abandoned him. Lars's father was a respected old policeman. When he learned the truth, he secretly arranged for Ludwig to live in an abandoned house deep in the forest for the past 6 years. I remembered our childhood days, when Lars and I were just 10-year-old boys running along the old cobblestone streets around the town. Once, Lars accidentally dropped a fishing net that my father had carefully lowered into the shallow well behind the house. The net broke into pieces, and my father was furious beyond words. He beat Lars badly, breaking a few of his teeth, scars that remain deeply etched in our memories to this day. On a bleak winter afternoon, as the north wind swept through the rough cobblestone streets of the town, a 14-year-old boy suddenly appeared among us. Without any warning, without explanation, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out an old iron ring. its cold metal glinting faintly in the flickering light. From that moment on, we became friends, walking together through countless dark days. Later, Lars and I both attended high school, except during the winter and summer breaks, when the town was shrouded in thick fog and biting cold. During those times, we hardly ever left school. Ludwig, the new friend, seemed almost never to be around. My father once said that some organizations were trying to arrange work for him. Although clumsy, Ludwig's life seemed to stabilize little by little as time went on. But now, it seemed Ludwig was the cause of the electrical problems throughout the town. When I heard that something had happened to Ludwig, the ceiling light in the dark room kept flickering, as if confirming a dark truth I had long suspected. We fled the factory in panic and rushed straight to Lars's house. All the household appliances from both families were there. I turned on the old TV, the screen flashed to life, and Ludwig's face appeared, his smile still wide and warm as ever. "Ludwig, what happened?" I asked, my voice heavy. Lars spoke up, his face full of worry. "He's dead. He's dead. Didn't I tell you to be careful with the electrical devices?" I hurriedly asked again, my heart pounding, as if about to burst from my chest. "Why? He's a good person. How could this happen to him?" "Evil kills evil," Lars said, eyes lifted toward the gray sky. The next morning, before dawn, we rushed to the city police station to meet Lars's father, a tough man familiar with the dark secrets the world hides. Under the pressure of the clues we presented, he began to reopen the case that had been forgotten for nearly 10 years. The truth, like a dormant snake, slowly slithered out of the muddy past. The power plant director was a tough and ambitious man. Ludwig had worked under him, but had been exploited repeatedly, and Ludwig often resisted. He even threatened to report serious misconduct, financial fraud, and safety manipulation to higher authorities. Mr. Gustav could not let that happen. A plan was devised, quietly and precisely, to eliminate Ludwig. Afterward, Ludwig's body was handed over to a pig butcher named Rupert, a fat, hunch-backed man reputed to be good-natured in the village. Rupert took the money and helped dispose of the body by mixing Ludwig's remains into spoiled meat sold at the market. Soon after, many people in the town began vomiting and suffering diarrhea, signs of poisoning that were never explained. But that was just the beginning. The old painter Enoch, who had been paid by Gustav to paint a memorial for Ludwig, remained silent and never reported to the police. He painted a painful portrait, but the painting could not save the soul. An old woman named Martha, who had sold Ludwig a rotten fish, mocked him at the market. That night she was found dead on her chair, foam at her mouth. 2 gamblers who once beat Ludwig for begging in the wrong place died from electric shocks. Their home appliances suddenly exploded as if touched by an invisible hand. Mrs. Valeska, who had tried to stop me from befriending Ludwig as a child, suffered a sudden stroke, calling Ludwig's name repeatedly in delirium, and so it went, one after another, falling like rotten leaves in winter. Each death a silent, gloomy, and absolute judgment. No one was innocent. No one. Ludwig's death, no longer a tragedy, had become a silent sentence, carried out by the very things humans once despised. A mentally challenged boy, a foolish smile, a lonely soul forgotten. And when I looked at the screen again, Ludwig's gaze seemed to fixate on me. Under his thin shirt, I felt a chill run down my spine. On the screen, his lips moved, no sound, but I clearly understood every word. "Brother, you promised, when we grow up, we'll build a snow..."